welcome back to another amazing episode of Ready, Set, Multiplex. We missed an episode last week, but we're back, and with 100% more Dave and 100% less Lou. He'll be back, but not this week. This week, I have two amazing guests. We have Calbe Boatman and the man, Jakey Two Belts. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good. I mean, Boatman is the fandom team's one of the fandom team's champions. So.
Oh, I apologize. I should put a little bit more respect on his name. And
you're looking at two legends of the games.
To be fair, you literally have Jakey Two Belts right there. So, like, it's easy for people not to not forget that. Like, people remember that pretty quickly.
My apologies. I have two amazing legends, monoliths of Multiplex entertainment with me tonight to break down two, maybe three amazing matches. And let's just say we get right into it. First up, we had Light It Up versus Cone of the Dead. What did you guys think about when this match was first airing? Or Caleb, you were actually on the desk for this. So as we led into the match.
Yeah, I think this was a very interesting match because I think Dom and Dustin are a team that last season kind of fizzled out gloriously in kind of an iconic moment. For those who don't know, there was essentially a lot of communication errors between Dom and Dustin. And there basically members of the team were saying final answer before they really checked with the other person, and it caused a lot of havoc. And that's how part of why Jake and Michael beat them so handedly. Also because Jake and Michael are just a great team. But this season, like against Cold Classics, they were on top of their game. Like this was a new Light It Up that we hadn't really seen before. And then they played second reel and they were just kind of okay. So I was interested to see how they were going to do. And then Jay and Mark are a team that are very hit and miss. I think both players are very hit and miss, and it just depends on what day you hit them on.
How about you, Jake?
Yeah, it's an interesting setup that you have because, like, Light It Up's the number 3 seed, and Cone of the Dead 14 seed. From that, it's like we don't really see a lot of upsets in that kind of perspective. Because Cone of the Dead, they're a good team. They're like, I like to think of them as like the team heroes of Multiplex. If they get their strength, they're going to go 10 for 10 with not miss a question. Like they have their strengths down to a T. That makes them very dangerous, especially with how round 3 kind of implements itself with picking a strength for the 4-pointer. Definitely can just set it back to their opponents to hit the 4-pointer, and you never know what could happen there. But Light It Up are they're one of the most knowledgeable teams in Multiplex in Warzone. But the one thing is that strategy is not their strongest suit, and this season they've completely improved upon that. You know, Don't You Forget About Me and Car Wash, all that is in the past, and they are getting better, which is a really good consistent thing for that team.
Well,
so I was definitely thinking that this could go either way.
Did you have a favorite going into it?
I think just based on the seeding, I had Light It Up.
Yeah, I had Light It Up for myself too. I think I've been very impressed in the limited time I've been studying the Multiplex entertainment, and they really impressed me this round. Both teams did, to be fair. When starting off the match, both of them getting 14 points in the first round, thanks to Mark going perfect and getting that bonus. That was huge, I think, really, and really helped not allow Cone of the Dead to start falling behind. Mark's a very interesting player to me. I think Jay has such a big personality that Mark gets kind of laid back a little bit, but he's a very knowledgeable player, and he's impressed me a lot. And then what can you not say for Light It Up, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, Jay is a big personality, and I think Mark is also a very big personality, especially more in fandom matches. I would say is when Mark kind of goes more into his character. I think he's chilled out on his character over here, but if you watch him in other leagues, he kind of goes into more like these types of rants, and it's like 50% like cringe and 50% okay, I'm vibing with this.
Yeah, I definitely like add that they work as a character. They also have like the tone of the characters like perfectly. And it's funny because they're like one of the few teams that play in both Fandom and Warzone, yet they have different team names, which is just I think kind of a hilarious thing that makes them kind of unique in that sense. Like what's interesting is that Mark he went perfect. He got a perfect round. He over Dom and Dustin, who I'd say are like really knowledgeable competitors. Mark really like impressed. He almost won the free for all. Like it just came down to Jacoby and a couple of instances with Jeremy, but like he's a very knowledgeable competitor in Warzone. He's just had unlucky playing. He's 0-2 in singles, and he just had bad luck with playing two better competitors on 2 better days. So.
Yeah, he debuted against Dominic Rizzi and kind of had a notable misstep when Rizzi spun opponent's choice, and he gave Rizzi his own strength of movie release date.
Those kind of blunders are going to happen to even the best of us. And sometimes, as we saw in this match, giving an opponent something that may be perceived as a weakness in Westerns can backfire on you. Light It Up really impressed me after spinning away from Westerns, getting opponent's choice, and then getting Westerns given to them. They did incredibly well.
Yeah, I was actually kind of shocked because if you know anything about Dom and Dustin specifically, the one thing that they're really not a fan of is classics. Like, they really don't like classics. Like, that tends to be, like, what will sometimes trip them up in their perfect rounds. But here, they went really well. I think 7 out of 10 is what they went for. Maybe 8, actually. I don't remember.
Yeah, they only missed. They only missed their fifth question, which.
Oh yeah, and they went multiple choice once.
Yes,
so they went,
7. Yeah,
7 for 10.
Yeah, so they really impressed.
Yeah, I think that one way you got to look at it is that with strengths in round 2, Western was just a round 2 category, so the questions are not going to be as on the high difficulty as choosing a strength. And also this is round 1, so we're not going completely crazy in a championship match. These are just basic round 2 categories. It's also a genre, so it's broad enough where it's like it's going to be not as specific in the questions. And also I do think it's kind of interesting for Light It Up because much like musicals, there's just so many of those that happened like pre-70s and like the 60s and like classic era. There's not really a lot of them now, so that definitely could have pumped them up with certain questions, but they were able to get through it. They only missed 1 question that round. They did as good as they could of getting opponent's choice.
Yeah, that was it. And moving on to Conehead's move, Conehead's round.
Conehead, great.
Getting Simon Pegg and Nick Frost moves. That's such an interesting category to me. As someone who's a little bit more involved in the administrative side, Calbe, what classifies as a Simon Pegg, Nick Frost movie? What would classify it to being in that category?
Yeah, so that was a case of that was kind of the dead strength. So that was, each team gets to put a foot on a wheel. So we kind of always will, when it's a weirder strength like that, we will always kind of ask them to specify in the match chats before the match so that everybody's on the same page. And basically, in this case, what classifies is any film that features performances from both Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. That's what Jay and Mark wanted. I'm pretty sure they just wanted that because they wanted Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Like, they wanted the Edgar Wright. I mean, they wanted Shaun of the Dead. Their team name is called Con of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and World's End. Like, those were the questions that they really wanted, I think.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, That's something that me and Mike are also trying to figure out, is picking strengths that work for us and are effective against our opponents. But this feels like a strength that they just wanted to go with, because with the way of Warzone strength rules go, you have to have at least 6 films for a category, for a strength category. And since, they only made, I think, 4 films, the 3 Cornetto movies and then Pole, they needed a couple more. So spread it out, make it Simon Pegg, Nick Frost. So it's broad enough, but it's also specific to like a certain filmography. And they did well. I mean, as I said, like if they get their strength, they're going to go, 10 for 10, 9 for 10. Did miss the last question, but also there was a really good pull by Jay, and they just really work well when it comes to their strengths. I mean, it's just that's what made it close going into round 3.
And round 3 really was an interesting round, I'll say that. And it's interesting that you talked about communication being an issue for Light It Up last season, because I think on kind of the Dead's round 3 is where we saw a little bit of a communication breakdown. You look at the Spider-Man question specifically about how many spiders there were. Mark says 15, and Jay talks him down. I think that's a moment where a little bit more communication could have been very helpful for them. And it's interesting that communication is kind of coming full circle for Light It Up, where now they're benefiting from some lack of communication.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I think part of the biggest problem with Con of the Dead is, I think one of the big things is you need to be able to recognize who is having the better game that day. And you need to trust the player that is having the better game on that day. Mark was on fire right then. So I think Jay kind of needed – I think there were 2 errors that Jay kind of made. I think one is I think Jay kind of needed to trust Mark, because it was really Mark that wanted the 15 the correct answer, and Jay was the one that kind of – nothing against Jay. Jay's a good friend of mine, but Jay was kind of the one that was leading Mark away from that. And I think Mark was having such a good game that I think he kind of needed to lean into Mark's knowledge a little bit. And I think the other error that was made is I think Mark probably should have taken the 2-pointer. I think Jay is a really good player, but if you look at who was having the better round 1, it was Mark. And I think if you look at who's more likely to know a data-based question, which is Jay tends to be more plot-oriented, and which is why I don't quite know why he took actors and actresses. I'm not sure if that was the best move for Jay personally. I think, but yeah, so I think they probably should have swapped, because I think if those 2 round 3 errors don't happen, we could have seen Con of the Dead get the upset.
Yeah, because it was 20-22 after going into round 3. Mark hits the 1-pointer, then they missed the 2 and the 3, hit the 4, forcing Light Up to hit their 3, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just do this quick maths. If they swapped it and it's 2, they hit the 2, missed the 3, hit the 4, they're at least getting it to... it's getting closer than what it could have been. And who knows, Jay could have hit the 1-pointer. So honestly, it could have been forced for Light Up to hit the 4-pointer. I think that's... One thing when it comes to teamwork is that you have to understand who is feeling more confident with the question. Like, they're both comic book guys, so obviously they both feel pretty confident with that category. So there is just other like variables you have to look at, like with Mark having the better game. You just have to have confidence with your teammate, and that can be tricky because it's like if it's a question that you just don't know, and yet you still feel like, oh, I feel like I could guess this. You just have to have confidence that your partner kind of has the right mindset going in with that question. I mean, it was a tough 3-pointer, but there was their round 3 strength in comic book movies. But it was a tricky one where it was a number 1, and they came close, but it was just in theory they came close, but it's one of those things that suck when you say the right answer, but you don't use that as the final answer. Everyone's been there before. But yeah, that round 3 is kind of what set the game to Light It Up. Not even having to hit any of their questions until Light It Up, until Con of the Dead forced them with their 4-pointer. So that gave them a lot of room to win the match.
Yeah, and you look at Light It Up, and you talk about that confidence as they're answering. They're 1 in crime. They're 2. They're their three to win the match. They are very confident, and they seem to have a nice, easy flow as they go through these questions, just answering them naturally. And Caleb, I believe you mentioned in the match, did they tie their team's record, or was 28 just their high?
No. So 28 points is the round 3 team points record.
That is impressive.
And that is the current record that was originally set by Light It Up against scruffy-looking Nerf herders last season. And then it was set again, that same 28 points, by Waterloo versus Southampton. So, yeah, currently and now Light It Up holds both the records. And scruffy-looking Nerf herders versus Light It Up, that went to sudden death. So technically, Light It Up got more questions. This was the first time where it had happened, and the team hadn't even answered their 4-pointer yet, which is impressive.
That's true. Like if Connor the Dead hits a couple more questions, we're potentially looking at a 32-point game here, and that is just an amount of points. I can't count that high, let alone answer that many questions. So where does Light It Up go next as they progress? Who are their next opponents?
Their next opponents are actually the winner of Jurassic Sharks, who we saw play Iron Eagles, and Bombardment Society, which is my team along with Zach Ford. So I could potentially be facing them, and I believe we find out who the winner of that match is this Thursday, even though it might not be this Thursday because I don't know when this video gets aired.
Oh, what a tease.
Yeah.
It's either happened or it's going to happen. Jake,
exactly.
If you don't know the answer, if you don't know the result of that match, who do you have going? Do you think Caleb will be facing Light It Up?
I will never bet against Boatman, honestly. He's one of my favorite people in this community. Knowledgeable, went 5-0 and fought Jeremy in the wins the Warzone tournament last year. It's actually interesting for both teams because they both won this season by way of KO. There's a little bit of luck involved, but both teams showed how consistent and knowledgeable, and also just chemistry and strategy. They have it all down. I could see this is probably maybe the closest of the round 1 matchups. Like, it could go either way. I mean, best seeding is a little, I would say, not accurate as far as both teams. It's 6 versus 11, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I can see it going either way. Like, they both don't feel like on paper, Bombardment win because of the 6th seed, but they are both not that seeding. They're 2 really, really strong teams. So it'll be interesting to see what happens because it could go either way, but I can't bet against Bowman.
Well, I'm excited to see that match, and I'm excited to see what Light It Up is gonna do going forward. But we have some more matches to get to, so let's take a moment beforehand to remind everyone that I do have 2 amazing monolithic players. There was a lot of upset at the beginning of the show that I wasn't giving Caleb or Jake the respect that they deserved. So I just want to, in the middle of the show, say this is our fandom. This is our fandom's champion, and then we have Jakey 2, our fandom, one half of the fandom teams. I'm sorry, and we do have Jakey 2 belts here with us. I just want to make sure, again, if you're just joining us somehow, that you remember the legends I'm playing with. Well, not even playing; I'm just podcasting with.
And also, both of us have previously held the Warzone team's title.
I can only give you so many accolades, people. All right. You know, I have champions of the ring here. Doesn't matter where you're ringing. They'll probably where you're ringing. Let's move on to the next match. It's Coho versus Nazario. Words are so hard today, aren't they? It's a good thing I'm hosting a show. So, Caleb Coho versus Nazario. How did you guys feel going into this match? Nazario, Coho was obviously 1-2 going into this match. Nazario, I believe, was 0-1. So, how did you guys feel coming into this?
Wait, what?
I think Coho's what? Is he 4-5? Coho?
Going into this, he's 4-5, and I think Nazario was like 3 and
1 and 2.
Oh, my apologies. Those numbers,
Okay.
I'm going to bleep that out because that's for a different thing I'm doing, and I have the wrong notes open.
Fair enough.
Anyway, Kayla, Coho and Nazario, two great players. How did you guys feel coming into this match?
I mean, I'm going to be a little bit biased because Coho is my manager. So I have to show a little bit of bias here, but I also think Coho is legitimately one of the best fandom players. I think he's gotten really unlucky, and he kind of started off not great. But I think we're going to see Coho actually make a really strong tournament run this season.
What will you, Jake?
Yeah, it's interesting because Nazario and Coho have been in this community since basically the very beginning of Multiplex, since the fandom and fandom tournament, like specifically, both were in it. And you just look at, I think it's fair to say Nazario. It's interesting because both competitors are also represented by their factions. That's probably the two biggest factions this season, with the Fellowship and Criterion channel. Criterion, newly reformed, newly made faction.
The Kingsmen and Criterion.
Oh, that's a kingdom.
You said the Fellowship.
Oh, that's the faction. I'm just having flashbacks to last season.
Yeah,
the great faction
was the faction from 2019 that held Robert Parker and was managed by Cody. Now it's called First Order. Robert's not here.
So the Kingsmen and Criterion collection, they're the two biggest factions right now, and they both have two representatives in this fandom match. It was interesting because I would say Cody is one of the hosts, the admins, one of the runners of fandom, and yet his knowledge wasn't always up there in the beginning. He went to the semis and he played in a triple threat number one contender match, but it just feels like he's also getting consistently better as a good competitor would, and it just shows that that part of it, I think him just knowing fandom that well, also just being one of the runners, and also he has strategy down. He also has a faction with him. And Nazario is more, I would say, Warzone centric than he is fandom. There's a lot of fandom categories that really are very an advantage to Nazario, but it was very interesting. It was like Warzone versus fandom, but they're both playing in fandom. So if that ever makes sense, but it was there. It's close on record and on paper.
Yeah, and you know what? Going into the match, I definitely also had Coho, not just because I knew that Boatman would be coming on the show, and I'd have to say that, but because I do agree with what you guys are saying. He has consistently shown a high level of play, and also his ability to just pull out those data-rich categories has always been a scary sight to see. There are some people who are just computers when it comes to that stuff. I'm not one of them, but he just consistently, if you can look at it on a list, he knows it, and that's a scary fact to look at.
I actually think that's a great point, because I think that's really the main difference. I think Coho is a very strong data player in this match. Nazario is more of a watcher. He's the plot-based guy. Coho is like the data guy. He is every scores and soundtrack, like every composer, every director, every voice actor. Like that's really what Coho is in terms of fandom. He's a walking encyclopedia in terms of the data, that's not really, if you look at either Warzone or fandom, that's not really where Nazario shines. He's more about plot-based questions.
Yeah, he gets his knowledge based on movies he watched, and if he hasn't seen the movie, then not really gonna help him with getting the question. I think that's part of why Coho is really impressed as far as me goes. He feels like he studies scores and soundtracks and fandom Oscars almost every day, because the two data categories in fandom, he would just be able to just pull any of them out. And I think just from memorizing and studying, if he gets one of those categories, he's gonna do extremely well. And that's part of studying. That's part of training and practicing and getting better as a competitor, is getting those data categories down and get it down to a T. So from that, he definitely had an advantage going into this match.
And he showed it right away. He was dominating out of round 1. 8 for Coho to Nazario's 4. As people who have played in this league, what does it look like for you guys when you see an opponent facing you and they have double your score, or vice versa? How does that make you feel going through after round 1? And how do you think Coho responded to this?
Oh, okay. I'll go.
I thought you were just going first. Okay, maybe.
I thought Jake was gonna go first. But yeah, I think you can't let that type of stuff get in your head. You just gotta kind of take it question at a time.
Yeah, it's one of those where if you have the lead, if you have that much of a deficit with the lead, it definitely makes you. I think the biggest thing with that is just it makes you feel more confident going to round 2, so that even if you get like a category you're not 100% with, you can feel like, oh, I'll take it because I at least know that I have like a safety net as far as a lead goes. But if you're on the downfall, if you're down by that much, it's definitely like a lot of pressure. But I think that you just at that point you just can't even think about the record. You just have to think about the next question, and then the question after that, and the question after that, because then you're just going to be constantly thinking, oh, well, I missed this. I could have gotten that if I just used a repeat, or the other. You just come up with excuses and like reasons as to why you're down this far, and you just can't. You have to just basically clear your mind with that sort of deficit and just pay attention to the next question.
Well, and speaking of the next question, we move into round 2. Nazario, he goes to spin, gets Star Wars.
Sorry, not to cut you off. Sorry, I gotta ask. I don't know if you know, but is that Co's best round 1?
I'm not positive, especially because
8 for 10.
Yeah, like that's the thing.
10, right?
That's totally possible. Again, I don't know his like how he did in 2018 era fandom because I was not there yet. At least best I've seen, probably.
Yeah, that was just curious to me because he only missed 2 questions, and with fandom, it's definitely different to Warzone because they ask a lot of specific categories since it's a specific league. So they're going to ask like plot-based questions in round 1, and he definitely just showed that. Yeah, he definitely came to play.
Mm-hmm.
Just curious about that.
Yeah. So moving into round 2, Nazario's goes up to spin, gets Star Wars, spins away, and lands on DC. DC is always a category that I am hesitant about whenever I see a player come across it, just because there are so many movies that are classified as DC movies. Like you can get a Dark Knight question, but you can also get a Jonah Hex question, like we saw in this match, or a Road to Perdition. There we go. I was going to go with something even more obscure, but that I couldn't think of it because it was so obscure.
Return of Swamp Thing.
So, what do you guys think about Nazario's round 2 here? He did pretty well. He was able to score up six points of his available 10, bring his lead, and he didn't give. Well, he gave Coho a chance to steal, but he was unable to. So, what do you guys think about Nazario's round 2? He ended up being 10-8, so he does reclaim the lead here.
I think that this was we're talking about after Nazario's spin, but before Coho's.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he did good because DC is a very tough category, but I also think I'm not positive, but I think that was Coho's strength. So I think he kind of maneuvered in it, and I think Coho was probably a little upset that he didn't get on the wheel, but I think he was also okay because Nazario did have to go to multiple choice a couple times, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think Coho is feeling pretty good, especially 10-8 coming out of Nazario's spin, but before Coho's spin. That's got to make Coho feel pretty good because now Coho has an opportunity, as long as he doesn't give up any steals, to kind of run the table.
And that's exactly what he's going to do here. He's going to get scores and soundtracks like we talked talked about it, and he's only going to miss the one question. Other than that, he's just going to get it.
Yeah, it's I think staying away from Star Wars was a good choice. Star Wars is just like, it's one of those ones where it's been asked so many times, and also the amount of specificities and questions and details. Going with something as more broader than like DC was a good choice. And I think Nazario would say he's pretty good at DC movies. Yeah, I think he did well enough to gain a lead, and he also didn't let any steals go to Ko, because I mean, that being one of his strengths, it definitely could have been bad on Nazario. And yeah, so as long as you have a lead with that, then I think in theory, you should be good, at least feeling good, because you just don't know what Ko could spin in round 2. Like, the luck could turn Nazario's way.
Yeah, and luck does play a big factor here as we get into round 3, which is always my favorite round in fandom fights, just because the betting round can make such incredible swings. As we have a champion here with us, could you talk to me a little bit about the betting round in round 3 and how that can play a factor?
I am the worst person to ask about that.
You're a champion.
I am the champion in fandom. That is true, and that's because I have Coho and Scully there to just tell me what to bet, and then I bet it. Because I am legitimately like, every match I've lost, I could have won if I bet differently. Every single match I've lost in fandom, if I would have bet a little bit differently, I would have won. So I am awful at the betting round. But I think it's important to understand how I'm off. I think I start off, and when I start round 3, I start off and I'm very not confident. I will play it very safe, and then I will hit something that I didn't expect to. And I'm like, okay. So then the next category comes, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bet 2 or 1 here, and then I miss, and now I'm scrambling because they just took the lead. And then I panic and I bet 2 and I wipe out, and then I would have hit the next one. And the betting round is complicated and it's not fun, and I hate it. But Coho is one of the best in terms of the betting round, because you can follow the Cody logic, where Cody will bet as little as possible, which is a format that works a lot of the time. But I also think that Coho kind of knows when to break from that, when to just go for it and say, let's end the game, let's bet 2. And I think Coho is one of the smartest in terms of betting around. I mean, you look at the way they maneuver this. Starts off with the DC. I think 1 is perfect because it's so broad. That was a smart bet. Star Wars, again, 1 because it gets so deep. Bond, so many movies, and I think it was smart of Coho to bet 0 there. Because A, so many movies, B, Nazario was falling way behind at this point, and I think Coho was expecting Nazario to bet 2 because he kind of needed it. And he didn't. So I think that kind of changed up Coho's game plan. And then you look at final question. Coho's really confident in MCU, but he bets 1 and he hits it and he puts the game away.
Yeah, it really comes down to your lead going into round 3, because he was what was it up by? It was 15-10. So he has that good of a lead where he could just bet 1 or 0. He definitely didn't have to bet 2. There was no do or die situation. And unlike Nazario, who at multiple questions had to basically make up some points and bet 2, whether it worked for him or not, it's just he didn't really bet 2 at any point except for the 4th question, and that's what set Coho with the win when he only had to bet 1, because at that point, I think also one thing with Bond, there are not a lot of people who are great at it, or even just good at it. It's a category with 24 movies spanning from 62 to 2015. It's a hard category if you've just not been a Bond fan for years now. And I think that's one thing with Bond, is that you just it's like a wild card, basically. Like, you just don't know what you could get. If it's a movie that you've seen, like it's a newer film, or if it's one from, Roger Moore, or even the Lazenby one. Like, it's a tricky category to maneuver. And I think getting 0 points for both competitors was the smartest thing to do.
I agree with that. I always love seeing people bet 0 points because it shows a level of self-awareness that I think not a lot of that only the top players really do have, because it takes a lot of bravery to say, I'm going to bet zero here, especially when you're down in Nazario's position, where at that point he was falling behind. It was 17 to 12, and he needed to start making up the pace, but he was still able to say, I'm going to bet 0 and hopefully come back for the next bout. That's all here for that match. Where do you guys see these two competitors going next? Caleb?
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, Coho, I fully predict, is going to make a run in the Fandom Singles Tournament. And I think he's going to make a run with his teammate in Fandom, Cameron. They're the Team Ascendant, and I think they're both going to do very well there. And I think, honestly, Coho is a dark horse pick for the winner of the 2020 Fandom Singles Tournament. I could legitimately see him winning that. He has one weak spot, but everything else he's actually like pretty great at.
And Jake, how about Nazario?
With Nazario, it sucks because that basically gets him down. Is he now 3-5 from based on his record? So it's hard to get back from a negative to a -2 record. Whether he qualifies for the tournament or not is up to Fandom admins and that sorting that out. He may play in a qualifier at this point because it's basically do or die for him as far as if he wants to get in the tournament. I mean, Nazario is a good player. He did lose in the first round last season, so whether he's able to come back from that, I mean, based on his record and also the fact that he lost this match, he would be down in the rankings. So whether his seeding is going to be good enough against a stronger competitor is going to be just based on luck. But I mean, yeah, it's just unfortunate with that, and so it's just a matter of will we be seeing him play in the Fandom tournament or will he be playing post tournament?
All right, and we have one more match. These two champions, I'm sorry, were very excited to talk about this match, and it was the match I was told at work, stop watching it, we don't pay you to watch YouTube videos. So it is Cult Classics versus Clash. Tell me about this match, guys, that my boss was yelling at me over.
Jake, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'll take it. So this is round 1 team tournament matchup. We have Clash at Demon Head, who I believe were the 13 seed. The 13 seed, and they were going up against Cult Classics, the number 4 ranked seed. Two very interesting teams. They debuted last season. Cult Classics started off really, really successful, going 2-0 at a knockout and a TKO. No one came close to them as far as strategy and knowledge. Then they stumbled a little bit with losing to current team champions Second Reel. And at the start of this season, they play Light It Up. Close, but it's either one person has a great game or the other has a bad game in a match. And Ethan, unfortunately, didn't have the good match in that one. And then they became 2-2, so 500 at that point. And then Clash of Demon Heads, you have Coho and Cameron Holzman. A pretty big upset, beating James White and Brian Michaels, now defunct Strange Brew. Really impressive performance in that. Then they took Second Reel to the distance last season by getting them to hit the 4-pointer, which Second Reel were able to do 1-1. So it's like the records don't exactly describe how great these guys are, similar to Jurassic and Bombardment. It's just unfortunate their losses. Like, it doesn't really show how good both these teams are. And like on paper, it could go either way. But I do think Cult Classics have a better as far as gameplay, knowledge, and strategy goes. So I think they definitely had like more of an advantage going into this match.
Yeah, I called Clash at Demon Head winning this one. I was pretty confident that they were actually going to win this one, just because I think we've seen a lot more flaws in Cult Classics than I think people thought originally. I think when Cult Classics were first announced on the scene, everyone was terrified of them. Because
there's one match in particular.
There was one reason in particular, and it was because Ethan Beller pulled off the upset of the century in his debut in Warzone when he came on the scene and beat the #1 seed Jake Maringoni. And I think that was kind of like a legendary moment. But then you kind of look after that, and Beller was kind of viewed to be like, really, really great. And he showed a lot more weaknesses as time went on. I think he kind of showed himself as a player who he knows what he knows, but if certain things go out of his wheelhouse, he kind of is dead in the water a little bit. I think Barr is a competitor who has improved greatly, but he still has weaknesses. You look at round 1 of the triple threat that aired this season, where it was Cameron Holzman, Andrew Barr, and Adam Collins. Barr out of the gate was only 2 points in round 1. And his entire round 1, only 2 points out of a possible 8. If he would have had a better round 1, he probably would have won the match. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic there. But I think Coho and Cameron are two players who just keep getting better every time they play. Cameron, that aforementioned triple threat, he was out of the gate 5 points. Coho played a really good game against Aaron J. So I think these are two players who are really at the top of their game. So I think this one was a lot closer than people thought it was going to be. I think a lot of people still have that hype for Cult Classics. And I think this is kind of where that hype dies a little bit. Like, nothing against Cult Classics, who are legitimately great teams.
What's great about both these teams is that you can really just feel their friendship. Yeah, because both teams just the chemistry is on point. Like, they both just know each other so well. Whereas they have confidence in each other, kind of echoing or kind of in contrast with Honor the Dead, where there's teamwork is just I think it's this, it could be this, and then they go with the wrong answer. Both teams are in sync as far as answers and just conferring, and I think that's shows that these are no mediocre teams, as even if with the records being 500, they both understand the game really, really well.
Yeah, and I think you look at this match round by round, and it was 13-14 at the end of round 1. That just shows how much knowledge is on this team, and then even ending up going to 26-27 at a final score. These are high scoring teams, and not maybe something that a lot of people, as you guys said, probably expecting Cult Classics to do a little bit better, if not hit that record. But then Clash of Demons, they come out there, they take them down. It's impressive to say the least, and I'm excited to see what they can do now that they have progressed in the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. I think Clash are a team that I think are actually going to make a decent run here. And nothing against Cult Classics, who I think are a really good team, and they're very skilled in their back and forth. But I think Clash of Demon Head are a team that I think people kind of wrote off a little bit, but I think this season we're going to be seeing a lot more of them. I want to point out what I think round 2, there was kind of something impressive going on here, where maybe not impressive, but just interesting, actually. Round 2, Cult Classics got Spinner's Choice, and they chose to go with Charlie Kaufman. And that's Ethan's strength. That is something that Ethan has rolled with. That's where Barr kind of just takes the back seat and lets Ethan do everything. If Ethan wouldn't have gone for the $200 King John Malkovich question, then Clash of Demon Head wouldn't have gotten the steal, and the whole match could have gone differently. And I think that's part of the problem. Is I think Jay kind of led them to pick a category that Ethan was stronger in, where if you look at the points, Bar was just having a much better game than Ethan that day.
7 for 8 in round 1.
Yeah. Yeah, Bar went 7 for 8, whereas I think Ethan was like 5 for 8, 6 for 8. I don't
5.
Yeah, 5 for
5, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, because of 13. Yeah, you're right. 7, yeah. So I think Bar Jade needed to trust Bar a little bit, I think was the thing. I think they should have gone musicals. Because here's the thing. Musicals was not a strength category. It was neither team strength. It was just on the wheel. Bar is great at musicals, but it's also not a strength category, so it's going to be less deep than a strength category, which is always going to be a little bit deeper. So I think that was really a strategy error at the end of the day. I think if Cult Classics takes musicals for Spinner's Choice, we could be talking about a whole different ball game.
I think also a big fat. I think from their mindset, musicals could also be considered a strength for Clash of Demon Heads. Like Kerr and particularly Cameron are really good at musicals. So I feel like they weren't confident enough to not just forgetting that that's just a round 2 category, not a strength category, and 2, them being the confidence in just taking that. Because I think their whole mindset was, if we miss a question, then they will get it. But it's like, if you're that good at musicals, you shouldn't have to worry about that. And especially going multiple will definitely be that safety net for them. That was just an error that you just, in the moment, you may not really think about. But I think one thing with Jay is that you should strategize before the match, when you find out your categories, when you start making a game plan for round 2 and round 3. So that could have changed the outcome of the game. We'll never know. I think going with Kaufman is good enough, especially with Bella, who's gone 10 for 10 in the past. It was just that being John Malkovich steal, which credit to Koho for one, watching the movie a few days before, but just knowing a detail like that shows that they are getting better with every game, Clash of Demon Head. And it was quite the upset for them to get. So.
And what I heard in that whole thing is that I think Boatman is trying to make a management play here, throwing out strategies. But
I talk highly about his manager.
I mean, that is. But I also think this game is about 50% trivia, 40% strategy, 10% luck. I think that's what this game is at the end of the day. I think strategy is a big part of success. You have to watch the game tape. You have to basically calculate risk. You have to do a lot of things. Like there are categories where you have, like Charlie Kaufman is a category that's been used a lot, and it's a strength. So it's going to get deep. And the more it gets used, the deeper it's get. So I think it's a dangerous category when it's been used so much, because at this point, as a writer, I wrote those questions. I had to kind of dig deeper as far as moments. I couldn't take surface level stuff. I had to kind of dig, at specific clips and specific scenes, like that Casablanca question. That is literally one line in adaptation.
I'm just happy that I knew it on 2 points. Just humble brag. But that was a good question, because it's a strength category. It's also a film written by Kaufman. It's one of those things where it's somewhat memorable if you know that scene, because it's the Robert McKee and he's talking to Nicolas Cage, and it's just them talking about writing scripts, and at the end he's like, just Casablanca, greatest script ever written. Like, I don't know, there's some certain details that you can pick up on just based on what's said, or like, so, oh, Casablanca, interesting. Like that's also one where it's like it's a specific moment where you could just forget it if you hadn't seen it recently. Like there's just certain questions like that can trip up you in a strength category, because you may be thinking one way for questions and they go the other way. So it's really hard to kind of predict where question writers could go. But I mean, if you're that confident, then you should be able to take it. And it's certain situations like that where, with questions getting deeper, you have to kind of assume that they're going to go deeper with the questions. So it's people with studying is a big factor that you have to kind of predict when it comes to taking these categories.
That's some great insight. Do you guys have any final thoughts on the match?
Winner plays either Blockbuster or Scruffy looking Nerf headers.
Yeah, that is accurate. Who I won't say because I know the result, so I won't say who I think wins. Jake, who do you think wins?
I wish I could say, but I also know who wins that match. So,
Jake, who do you think wins? Bot video, which is Mario and Mike Hanlon, or Scruffy looking Nerf headers, which is Nick Twig and Antonio Chavez?
I based on my experience, I would never bet against scruffy looking Nerf herders. They're a team that has impressed me consistently in their play. I think, but to be fair, I think both of those teams will lose to Clash of Demon Head. I might have been drinking the Kool-Aid throughout this show, but I'm all on board with Boatman's predictions here. I think Clash of Demon Head is really a dangerous team going forward. So I don't much think it matters who wins that match.
I will say what's very interesting is that there's parallels with both these matches because it's a 2-2 team playing a 1-1 team, and their records don't exactly describe how good all these teams are. Blockbuster with one of the greatest upsets beating Wild Stallions. And I can't bet against my faction in scruffy-looking Nerf headers. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially with Criterion also as a newly made faction, and Blockbuster are in that faction. It's another faction wars. It's interesting because Kingsmen have 3 teams, if I'm not mistaken, in this tournament. So their chances of winning is high.
Right now, more teams than any of the other factions, because Criterion has 2. They've got 1 team in this tournament, and they have the team.
And they have the champions.
But 2 basically, because they have the champions.
And then First Order is 2 also.
First Order has 2 because they have you and Michael and Nick and Antonio. NBE doesn't have, has technically like a half because they have
density.
They have Adam Collins, and then Kingsman. We've got technically 2.5 because Waterloo is only 50% Kingsman because Adelaide Spence is not in the faction, but Cameron Redshot is. Hashtag represent Cameron, my Iowa buddy. We're the only 2 players in this community from Iowa, and it makes me happy. And we're both good at trivia, so hashtag Iowans are good at trivia.
That is a long hashtag. But on that, to the man with the long hashtag, where can we find you, Caleb?
Most importantly, find me hosting, playing, writing, show running Movie Warzone on Multiplex. Find all the other great content on Multiplex. The other place, you can find me playing in all the trivia leagues. You can also find me on as a correspondent on Schmo Center on NBE, also playing games there sometimes. And you can also find me on Letterboxd at Caleb Boatman.
And to my other champ, where can the people find you?
Find me on Twitter at PretentiousHack, the P and the H are capped. I'm also on Letterboxd at Maestro003. I am the Movie Warzone singles champion. I will be defending my belt sometime in the near future against either Caleb Boatman or Adam Collins. I'm also the Movie Face-Off singles champion, where I'll be defending my belt against Michael Campbell, who is also my team partner. And we are both in the Movie Warzone team tournament. We're going to be playing Pain and Gain in the round 1. Let's hope for another Bella upset, because that would be the worst thing. And that is about it. Yeah, you can find me in Multiplex. Being a guy.
Being a guy. And you can find me, as always, at Leaves Me Alone on Twitter, at BabyJamesLees on Instagram. And while you're there, follow Schmoes in the North on Facebook. Follow us over on Twitter at Northern Schmoes. And subscribe to our YouTube page. Thank you, and we will be back next week with another exciting episode of Ready, Set, Multiplex. Bye, guys.